Welcome, everyone, to the Ovis Live event. I'm Ovis Chief Correspondent Tracy Grant. If you haven't heard about Ovis before, Ovis is the future of news. We're working on building a trusted place that empowers everyday people to make the news trustworthy, verified, and accountable. We're in the testing stages of the world's only platform that will allow you to incentivize journalists to tell the truth and hold them accountable when they don't. One of the ways we hold journalists accountable is through fact checking. It's the centerpiece of our platform. So, what does it take to become a fact checker? Well, let's meet one. Our special guest today knows a lot about fact checking. His name is Nitish Pawa. He's currently a journalist at Slate.com, but he's also a former copy editor at Slate. And as a copy editor, he had to fact check stories. Welcome, Nitish.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, also joining us is the person who created Ovis, Linton Johnson. Linton's career spans 32 years as an award-winning journalist and communications executive. In December 2021, he made history by making Ovis the world's first blockchain-powered news network designed to incentivize truth-telling. Linty?
Hello, welcome everybody. Glad to be on your show as always, Tracy. Welcome, Nitish. Good to see you. Good to have you.
Thank you. Good to see you as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both for joining. I really appreciate it. Let's get started because I find this subject matter really interesting. Now, Nitish, we'll start with you. But before we do, just a reminder to our audience, if you're watching us live, you can use the chat or comment section to ask us questions. Now, Nitish, why did you become a copywriter who fact checks?
Yeah, so it started in college when I studied professional writing at Michigan State University. And when I was taking various courses there about publication editing, online writing, design, and such, one of the courses included copy editing course, and there were other classes to apply that to, like producing a miniature magazine within our arts and letters department and such. So through that, I got a lot of hands-on experience, like learning, basic, journalistic styles, the difference between AP Chicago, so on, and also like what things tend to get checked in the copy process and the editing process and with the writers and with the sources and so on. So I was really able to draw on that experience when I applied to Slate for a copy editing position there. And the way a lot of our copy editors do things in Slate is we do both like the grammar and style checks, of course, but we also make sure to check a lot of basic facts that we can within the copy, whatever it is, dates, names, like, certain like facts, allegations, or quotes, even just as long as, and citations from other sources, just to make sure that everything is as clean and as accurate as possible.
Okay, just let me tell you that Linton and I have been arguing about the Oxford comma for about
No,
5 years
we
now.
don't argue. We're on the same page on that one.
We will talk about it before this ends.
Okay.
I will say, I know AP Style is not a fan of the Oxford comma.
No.
But at
As
Slate,
well it
that
shouldn't
is one
be.
of our that is one of our exceptions to the AP Style book, actually.
Oh, Nitish, you just ruined it. So just for those who don't understand the Oxford comma, that is when you have a series of things like, cheese and bread, or cheese, butter, and bread, and before the and is the Oxford comma. Well, in AP Style Guide, you don't have that comma, and Tracy and I agree.
You shouldn't have the
You
comma.
should not have that comma. I think that comma is terrible. And it's a source of it can cause a civil war in a newsroom. Whether you have that,
it really can, though. It really can.
Yes.
It forever is a source of dispute for sure.
Well, Nitish, what is it that you enjoy about fact checking?
Yeah, I mean, it's just super interesting to like. It was something I really learned, I feel like, on the job as I was going along. Like, okay, what are the things I really need to look out for? What are the these particular institutions? What are these like quotes? What are these just various like things that are put into the piece, like
Mhm.
when they say like oh, there's one poll said that voters think this, or they just say, they don't even say the poll, they just say voters think this, and you're like, okay, well, where does that come from?
Mhm.
Why are they saying that? What are they drawing upon? Is it an accurate source, or at least like a well-regarded source, and so on? So that became like a lot of fun for me to like just kind of spot those things throughout a piece, and then look it up subsequently however I could, and try to verify however I could, or if like I had no immediate like way to like verify it for myself, like flag it
Mhm.
for the editor and the writer in a note, be like, hey, just wanted to double check this thing or such. And it's like I said, it's a fun process. It's a really like diligent, interesting one. I think it makes our website better. I think it makes our journalism better. And it also teaches you a lot. Like I've learned so many things from just going through someone else's copy and like making sure
Mhm.
that everything aligns up.
How do people become fact checkers, though?
hmm Yeah,
Mhm.
so there are different ways that one can go about this. I mean, I know a lot of people with like a basic journalistic training can get into the fact checking world if you take like certain courses, apply to like certain jobs in the field, or if you're even like freelance fact checking, just like doing it for certain publications or like newsletter writers or for other people who may operate on a more non-institutional basis. Um, I do wanna, like, specify, like, in my case, like, we were kind of hybrid copy fact checking people, whereas, like,
Mhm.
they're usually, like, copy editors in some newsrooms who are only style and grammar, and
Mhm.
then there are fact checkers who, like, go really deep in, like, calling up the sources, verifying, like, these exact quotes or, like, these exact events that a reporter may put in their copy. And it really depends on like, what your newsroom is, where the budgets are, what the priorities are. Like, unfortunately, we don't have a ton of like bandwidth and resources available for like full on fact checking of that sort. But at the very
Mhm.
least, the copy editors are empowered to really look at what's there and to try to make sure that, because we're sort of the last gatekeeper before this goes live, like, okay, are we sure everything here is square? Like for real, for real.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
and that's how we end up there. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of a sad state of affairs in journalism in general, but also like specifically like when there are layoffs or budget cuts, copy departments, fact checking departments end up being the ones that get really cut, which is why, again, I think there are a lot of opportunities also in independent media for
Mhm.
such, as although you might not be doing it full time, but but I think it's a really, really essential part of journalism, and it should have resources dedicated to it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. A lot of people don't realize. I mean, I at one point worked at the Boston Globe, and I've worked in TV, for a really long time. A lot of people don't realize that fact checking doesn't necessarily exist in these institutions. I mean, you have somebody who's out there checking your grammar and make sure your story makes sense. But when I was at the Globe, only like longer magazine pieces or investigative pieces had people actually fact checking. I didn't come back from a drive-by shooting and somebody said, "Oh, let me make sure this is all right." That was up to
Huh.
me as the reporter to make sure it was right. And definitely sometimes there are mistakes, right?
hmm Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even when you go through our process, some mistakes slip through. Like we're only human, right? And the it's also like a matter of the incentives and economics and timing of journalism these days, right? So Slate is has always been a digital most outlet, like digital
Mhm.
primary outlet, and because of that, it's often had to follow the headwinds of whatever comes along in developments in journalism, whether that's like, short, quick aggregation blog posts that we put out there, or like longer pieces that may go through the process that are a little bit slower, but then those are in between like other like faster pieces that we want to like publish or push out there first, because we may have a scoop, or we may be like covering that, like we were one of the people who were only like really prominently covering it. So, and that also hinders this process, right? Because, you know, if you really want to do like an in-depth like copy edit and fact check, you know, go through multiple rounds, go through all those calls, go through, you know, multiple like phases of, all right, here's this round of red lines and questions, and here's what comes next, and here's how we plan it. Like, it can't always be that way
Right.
anymore, unfortunately. But I am thankful at least that we do have the process still for especially like our meteor like reported longer pieces, and I think that should continue to be the case a lot of places.
And you can take courses to learn this type of thing, or how do you become a fact checker?
Yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of websites and media resources out there. I mean, there's like, I know Media Bistro offers a ton of different courses and certifications. There are all sorts of websites, like, or even like publications online that'll offer you, you know, little free fun quizzes that you can take to like learn stuff. I remember when I was applying for Slate's copy editing position, I would take some of the New York Times copy editing quizzes just to like, you know, brush up, make sure like
Oh,
I was
interesting.
on top of things. And that was alone like a very helpful resource. But yeah, there are all sorts of resources. There are all sorts of people you can talk to who are in fact checking. It's, I think one thing is also helpful is like trying to find like a professional journalism organization and talking to people who are, you know, experienced in this and figuring out from there.
Well, you know,
Now,
the KSJ fact checking project, KSJ fact checking project. If you Google that, that's a great resource. But it does assume that you already know some fact checking. But just for those who are interested in learning a little bit more about the process, you can go to the KSJ fact checking project. It's run out of MIT. And the Night Science Journalism program is what it's sponsored by. So that's just one resource as well. Sorry, Tracy, to interrupt.
oh, well, you always do, so it's okay.
This is how we roll.
Just kidding.
She and I go way back, so she can talk to me like that.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
She
yeah.
takes full advantage of that relationship.
That's true. Okay, so as we all know, there are some good sources of info, you know, when you're trying to make sure information is accurate for a story, and there are some that are not good sources, not reliable sources. Now, how do you, Nitish, figure out what is a good source and what is a bad one?
Yeah, so I mean, whenever we get a piece to copy edit, you know, go through the whole process, like obviously with digital pieces, a lot of the citation is done through links, right? So
Mhm.
we do go through and check every single one of those links just to make sure everything is kosher. Like, you know, is there a quote or like a specific claim attributed to the source? Okay, we're going to make sure that that's actually in there. And if it's not, then what's going on? Um, and the thing is, like, we are pretty flexible with like authoritative sources, but we want to make sure that they are trusted sources. Like, obviously, if it's like an outlet known for like disinformation or for like extreme bias, then we want to maybe try to avoid that. And if there's just like a claim or quote that comes out of nowhere and we don't really know, like, you know, there's no link or there's no really easy way of finding out where it came from, you can flag it and be like, hey, so where did this come from? Why are we using it? Can we trust that? Et cetera, et cetera. Um, and so it really depends on a lot of things. I mean, you know, big newspaper institutions, the Times, the Post, and such, government departments that, you know, are known for diligent science, which is
Mhm.
obviously not always the case. You got to be careful. And,
Exactly.
you know, other just like authoritative sources in general, whether they're like, you know, large compendiums, academia, and such. And if there's a source that seems a little whack to us, like we are like kind of empowered to flag it and be like, okay, this seems a little weird. Like, are we sure we can make this go through? And then, we can work with the editor and writer to figure out, okay, why we use this, what's it saying, and like, is there a better way or a better source for this claim? Or is there like a better like or like, is it just like this is just junk altogether, and then we might as
Right.
well smash it? So.
Exactly. Well, okay. So when when you figured out that a source um, might be embellishing or lying, giving out misinformation in a quote, um, how do you call out the lie? Is there a way to use the quote and then, later, in the text actually say, well, this is a bone of contention, or what we've found is this or that. Like, what do
Hmm.
you do? Mm,
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, supposing a source puts out a quote with like some really wild stat that seems, not uh very reliable, whether it's, something about money or polling or something that's very like sort of quantitative and tangible. We
mhm,
I might just do like a basic lookup of, okay, where we had like past resources on these, what reports have like talked about this, what research can we put it that has been put into this field, and what did they say about it. And if it turns out that there are multiple sources that indeed contradict what the source has said, then it's like it's a pretty like diplomatic thing. Like, you highlight the quote, you put in the comment like, hey, so um there are these other sources that are saying this thing that contradicts this. How do we square that? And what does the source think about that? And if it turns out that the writer needs to go back to the source to double check that, then they might, and we might even be looped in on that process just to like make sure, that it's coming through just fine. And if it turns out the source, was just really talking out of their ass, to put it lightly, then we will strike it, like, and hopefully no one's feelings are hurt in the process.
Hey,
okay.
Tracy, there's a cool question here from Ankita. She says, can we hold our sources legally accountable for lying? I think that's to you, Nitish. Can
Wow.
we hold our sources? Yeah.
That is an interesting question. I mean, journalists are supposed to have like these like very trusting and diligent relationships with their sources, right? And the problem with, the whole legal thing is obviously whenever it comes to news, there's a very high legal bar, I think rightly, for figuring out whether like a certain piece can be, is considered defamatory or like, purposefully like, done with ill will or intent to harm. And in those instances, it's not usually the sources who are like put on trial, right? It's like it's the journalist or the institution overall, and maybe the editor who's like, okay, but as a journalist, as an editor, as someone who is like, devoted to fact, like, why were you not more square, like when it came to the source?
Mhm,
So I don't see a legal path for that right now, but I'm also not like a legal expert. Like maybe there are means by which, especially maybe if there's an individual route from the journalist, but I do think it does make it extra incumbent upon journalists and editors and fact checkers and copy editors and whoever else is involved in the process to make sure, like, yo, we this is why I trust this person. This is what they say, and and I promise you, like, we're not like putting ourselves in for deep trouble by using what this person says. And
mhm,
often, you can have like in-house counsel or outside counsel also come help lawyer things if you need to.
mhm.
Got a lot of questions in chat, Tracy, just by
Yeah,
the way.
yeah, I
So let me
see
know.
them there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, something that Wheeler Marketing Agency wants to ask Natish. Um, how do you handle such a process for news that's breaking or urgent? How do you handle fact checking in that way?
Yeah, that one can definitely be tougher, especially because, again, the incentives of digital media are just so immediate and fast and breakneck. I do think for if it's a breaking news story that is especially sensitive, like it targets, maybe, I guess targets not the word, but like focuses on a particular person or a particular institution, or making claims that may not be totally public or out there, like then we'll run it through like a last minute copy edit, or fact check, and that one will be probably on the faster end, especially if it's a scoop. But, at the same time, like you're prioritizing, okay, this is what we really want to look out for here is like, it's not necessarily like every single quote or stat in the piece, but more just like, okay,
Hmm.
the overall thrust of this piece is focused on this one thing,
Hmm.
this one institution. What is the piece saying about that institution? Why is it potentially sensitive? How can we make sure that we're not getting our wires crossed or doing anything that could, potentially out someone or misidentify something? Or
Right.
so it's like you end up prioritizing a certain sense in a breaking news piece. So you might not get to everything you want to because you're trying to go a little faster, and that's an unfortunate side effect, but you kind of have to figure it out in the moment, or figure it out with the editor and writer and per, you know, everyone else working at Slate who's trying to schedule these pieces, get them out there,
Hmm.
promote them, make sure everything's square.
Okay. Okay, so we have a LinkedIn user who says it seems truth these days has more to do with one's worldview and perspective than what is verifiable. Now, how do you deal with this?
Wow, that is quite a question. I mean,
That's
I
the big question.
Yeah, yeah, for real. That's philosophical. I mean, I do think there are such things as objective truths. Like, I have long hair. Yeah, that is just the truth. I mean, I
Mhm,
don't think you can really like throw in an alternative fact or anything on there. But no, but I do understand that. Like, absolutely, this is the internet especially has really made it a way more like opinionated world, and like
mhm,
a world where a lot of people can just speak freely without like really checking what they're saying, verifying what they're saying, and a lot of people really trust them, and
mhm,
that is an issue. It is a real problem, and the advantage that some of those like speakers or outlets have is that, yeah, they don't have the diligent fact checking processes, so they just
mhm,
put out whatever and they sound good saying it, and that is what it is. And I mean, it's really tricky because you obviously don't want to like delve into censorship. You don't want to like delve into cutting off
right.
anybody's speech rights, but you do want to be there to be like, okay, look, this is just not correct what this person is saying. And here
Mhm,
is why it is not correct. Or if it's something that's maybe less like immediately verifiable, you can counter it with, okay, this is what these studies have found. This is what these people have said, and
mhm,
why you should listen to them on this. This
right.
is where, this is the evidence we have so far to support this side of things. And you put that out there and you make like a really strong case for it, and frankly, like hope it catches on, because I mean, at this point, we are just saturated with misinformation and disinformation, right? And
Mhm,
it's just like an ever harder like task to really try to you know fight against that. But that's why you also have to be extremely diligent yourself as
mhm,
a news outlet, and so that people trust you. And so when you are drawing on other sources and drawing on other counters to this misinformation, are you are able to make a persuasive case that could sway people who might not have gone into it before.
I'm
So
gonna
Yeah.
Jump in
Go
real quick
ahead.
if you don't mind. Yeah, so I
Sure.
was going to say, well, Kevin Fugate says people literally believe anything that is on Google as if Jesus said it. Good grief, I agree. There's so much stuff that is out there that is misinformation. But kind of going back to your question, Tracy,
Mhm.
rather the LinkedIn person's question, and that is how do you deal with that? With Ovis, the way we're going to deal with that is we're going to provide the facts, and then people come to their own truth. Because my favorite example is a train crashes. There are 100 people on board, 99 people survive, and one person dies. There are at least two factually accurate stories that can come out of this. And one is tragedy. One person is dead in this train crash. The other one is miracle. 99 people survive. Two different narratives, two different perspectives, and whatever you want to believe is the truth is fine, but at least both of those narratives are based in facts. And I'm not sure we'll ever solve the problem of there are some ultimate truth thing, like, right, it's raining outside here in the Bay Area. I don't think anybody can deny that. But I think sometimes there isn't an ultimate truth. They're just facts that lead to what you're going to believe is the truth. I mean, if you also look at it from this perspective of a court case, right? You've got the defense and you've got the prosecution, and they're both going to come at the narrative, but they all have to be factually accurate. Their narratives have to be factually accurate, but they have a different spin, of course. Right. And so the jury is going to come to what they say is the truth. And I think as long as we're at Ovis providing factually accurate stories, then you're going to be able to arrive at your own truth on a lot of things that are not so obvious.
Well, a lot of that has to do with the whole model of ratings and clicks, right, Nitish? I mean, do you notice that when you're reading other publications or watching TV, like, the facts sometimes are shaped just to bring in as many eyeballs as possible.
Oh, 100%. And like, I mean, to be frank, and I'm sure my colleagues would also agree, like this just is the case. Like, yeah, we engage a little bit of that too, like, trying to take out like the most like compelling detail and putting in a headline and getting people to come, on board. And yeah, it is just like we need the traffic, we need the ad hits, we need the revenue. It is what it is. But there's still ways to do that in which you are not like misleading or misinforming your audience. I mean, you saw like a huge example of that this week where like there's this whole panic about, oh, the government is coming for your gas stoves because one Bloomberg headline like ran with one like toss aside comment from one public commissioner that they're looking into gas stoves and like maybe a ban will be on the table, who knows. They ran with US is looking to ban gas stoves, and then everything just like, but that was not happening. That was just not happening. And then and all of this was for nothing. So yeah, I think there's a difference between like, focusing on one particular detail or person or item that you think will draw readers in versus just like straight up trying to induce panic in order to get your metrics up.
Well,
Induce panic.
No, he's right though. A friend of mine said to me yesterday, she's like, I'm thinking of getting rid of my gas stove. And I was like, oh my God, like, tell me, you saw this, one of like 300 stories yesterday about gas stoves, right? She was like, yeah,
and I mean, look, like, I am pro switching out gas stoves. Like, I think there's a very strong case to be made for electric and induction stoves, but you also can't be saying that the government, FEMA is coming into your households to rip out your gas stoves from the wall. That's not happening, and then that's just like what everyone just wants to run with. And it's very...
I haven't even heard this controversy, by the way, so you guys have to fill me in.
Oh, dang.
No, I guess I'm behind. I mean, because every day on the news, something is going to kill you. Something is going to kill you, depending on like one day running too much is going to kill you. The next day is the best thing that you can do. It's just so funny.
Exactly.
Those
vitamins in your bathroom cabinet,
right?
Don't use those; they'll kill you tonight at 5.
Your kids,
right? Yeah, and it's like, yeah, like you all are saying, it's like there's one thing when it's like, oh yeah, there are adverse health effects versus no, this will literally kill you. There's such a huge difference.
Well, Linton, we
Yeah.
talked a little bit about how fact checkers are the centerpiece of the Ovis platform. Is there anything more you'd like to add about that? Like,
Yeah,
how could
actually,
somebody like Nitish help us?
well, so one of the things that we're trying to do, and maybe it's just easier to kind of show the process. As you had mentioned, Tracy, we put in December 2021, we built the world's first blockchain-powered network and put it on the blockchain. The blockchain piece, don't worry about it. The reality is the process of how we fact check stories, and we're doing something completely different. We're getting rid of the ratings and clicks model, and we're incentivizing truth telling by rewarding great journalists like Nitish for doing great stories, and then anybody who's purposely trying to spread misinformation and fake news, we can hold them accountable. That's what the blockchain can do. But the idea is to kind of get rid of that ratings and clicks model and allow everyday people to come up with the story ideas and fund those story ideas. And I'm going to show you how that works. But as you also mentioned, Tracy, fact checking is a centerpiece to that. So we're on a test net right now. We've been testing this for the last year, but this is our web app. And the centerpiece to that is what we call Ovis. So if you think, if you're listening to the news and you don't believe something, and I saw somebody, Lynn Fugate says, I'm losing trust in any news. So I do my research now. Well, one of the things that you can do is you can Ovis it. Like Lynn, you could come over here and just click on Ovis, and you could submit a question to journalists and ask whether something is true. And then our fact checkers and our journalists can do the research on it. Or if you just want to come up with a story idea, because there's many times where, you're watching the news, like, why don't they cover this? Why don't they cover that? Why do they only cover negative stuff? You can submit story ideas. The whole idea behind Ovis is to give power back to the people. So everyday people can pitch story ideas and create the news instead of basically the 6 major corporations that control nearly everything that we see and hear. And only a few people are making those decisions. Now we, the people, can make those decisions. So you would Ovis it. You put in your story idea like that. And then I'm just going to kind of jump through this to make it quick, but we're going to go here and we're going to look at other people's story ideas. Just a little bit of background here. This is on the test site. So even though we're trying to end fake news, all these stories are fake. But this is just testing. But here's the idea. You post a question and then other people look at this and go, oh yeah, I want to learn more about that too. And so they upvote these questions with their tokens. And let's just say, for the sake of simple math, each token is worth $1. So this story here is what happened to Deshaun Watson's accusers. It comes with 220 tokens or $220, right? So a journalist will then take a look at this story and say, I'll write about that. And then they write about it. And before they can post it, it has to go through fact checkers. So those fact checkers don't know each other, and it has to be a minimum of 3 fact checkers, who don't know each other. They can't collude on the information. And so they fact check the story, and 2/3 of the fact checkers looking at the story have to come to consensus that this story is factually accurate. And then once that's done, it's published, and the story is available for you to read. Now, because we're trying to reward great journalists, you can, not only does that money, so that purse of 220 tokens basically gets split amongst the journalists, the fact checkers. And then if Lynn had created that story idea, Lynn would get some of those tokens. She'd be rewarded for creating a great story idea. And the remaining amount of tokens go back to the rest of the community. So they get to share in basically the revenue of those tokens. Now think about the current business model right now. The ratings and clicks business model, the only people who share in the revenue are the stockholders. And the people who suffer the most are we, the readers, we, the viewers, the news consumers, because we get divided by misinformation and fake news. What we're trying to do here is reward and incentivize great journalists. The other thing that happens here is that when you are a fact checker or a journalist, and you fact check a story or write a story, you have to put down a little bit of money saying that I'm putting my money where my mouth is, that the information on here is trustworthy, verifiable, and accountable. And so if anybody wants to challenge that, we know exactly who put the information down, and we can go back to that person and find out whether that person purposely tried to mislead people or if it was just an accident. So we can go back and correct that record or hold that person accountable if they're purposely trying to spread misinformation and fake news. So this is basically trying to give power back to the people and allowing everyday people to hold journalists accountable, but more importantly, reward great journalists who are doing a great job and fact checkers as the check on those journalists to ensure that our news is trustworthy, verifiable, and accountable.
Now, we have a question from Chad Man. He wants to know, does it have to be something on Ovis, or can it be any news we would like to have checked?
It can be any news that you'd like to have checked. Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be, and it doesn't even have to, it's our thinking is this: if you, whatever you hear, read and hear on the internet, don't believe it, Ovis it. That should be your first stop. Don't go to Google, because Google, you have no idea whether the stuff is true or not. But don't believe it, Ovis it. So that's really what we're trying to go for right now.
Okay. And for both of you, Wheeler Marketing Agency asked, how do you feel social media has played a role in misinformation, censorship, disinformation, and everything else wrong in the world?
I'll let Natisha answer that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's super weird, right? Because on the one hand, social media has allowed so many people, so many narratives to emerge and have more prominent voices than they may not have had before. And that's, on the one hand, a really good thing for a lot of people who tended to be gate kept out of traditional media outlets.
Yeah.
On the other hand, that has also led to a lot of people with no business like dictating discourse doing so. And it is a problem. And I think what happens with social media is there's an immediacy to it, right? Like everything spreads so quickly, it gets to you so fast. You are just scrolling through and you can just find like one post that says something offhand with no other information, and you think of it, you just read it, you think of it as true because maybe a friend or some other place you posted like trust it, and then it just never gets questioned. I mean, what's that famous saying, like a lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth can get its pants on? I mean, I feel like
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
been especially compounded in the era of social media. And like, you know, this has been a debate now ever since social media came into existence, right? Like you could even like see people talking about this, frank, like in the early 2000s, and it's like, I don't really know what the solution is other than just like having a social apparatus where there are stringent content moderation standards, there are like ways of easily verifying a source, there are ways of like there's a diversity of people at the top of a given social platform to give their inputs and make sure, like, okay, hold on, here's what this thing is saying, how do we make sure this is actually accurate? And that, it requires a lot of people, it requires a lot of work, it requires a lot of effort, and it's hard. And I think it's just going to get worse as all these AI developments especially start coming out. Like you're going to have people, chat GPT-3 is going to write like whatever, someone's going to replace that, and that's just going to compound. And so I think that speaks to the need for just more resources on these public discussions, on these public squares, as they call them, on these social outlets. Like, look, here are the standards we will abide to, and being consistent to them. Like, look, if you're a social media outlet that says, okay, we ban misinformation in all forms, and you're a private company, you can do that, great. Like, but then actually stick to that, actually, do that.
Right,
And
right.
don't give people reason to believe you are, just doing whatever willy-nilly. Like, mistakes will be made, that is inevitable, but you really, really have to make sure you have a lot of people and you have a lot of ways to verify things working against these things. And unfortunately, you're seeing kind of the opposite effect now with tech companies just cutting a ton of workers. And that definitely worries me, especially as we go into wherever the heck AI is going to develop into the future.
Okay, one last question from Chad Mann, who is killing it with the questions this morning.
I love it.
He wants to know, can Ovis be manipulated, i.e., one political side buying out the fact checkers and pushing a narrative through? Linton, what's the answer?
Here's the answer, and that is we have to build a huge community of people of all walks of life. And when we build a big community from varying viewpoints, it's virtually impossible to manipulate. Yeah, if it's just one political side that is part of the community, then yes, it can be manipulated. But the idea is to invite all points of view to the platform, because when you're pitching a story, people will upvote based upon their political viewpoint. And then this is the other thing that we're going to be building into Ovis, which is the future of news is not here just yet. But even if a story has a kind of a political narrative, in Google, Google will always feed the narrative that you are attuned to, right? Your belief system will, when you do a Google search, it kind of figures what that is. In Ovis, what we're trying to do is if you see one political narrative, you're also going to see the other side as well. Because we're going to feed you stories from all points of view. So if our algorithms, which will be transparent, by the way, unlike the other ones, our algorithms are going to say that if you lean left, we're going to show you stuff that leans right, or vice versa. So we want you to see, back to that whole train crash story, we want you to see all narratives. Yeah, one person died, tragedy, 99 people survived, a miracle, two different stories. You're going to see that when you search for the train crash.
All right. Well, this has been really interesting this morning. That does it for us. I'd like to thank my dearest Linton for coming on this morning with us, and my brand new friend, special guest Natish, for also joining us. I also want to thank you out there for spending your Saturday with us. Please follow us on social by visiting our website at ovisnews.com. That's ovisnews.com. I'm Tracy Grant. Thank you so much for watching.